In the last lecture, we made a list of those factors that influence the behavior of suppliers. In this lecture, we're going to look at a particular factor, that is, the price of bread, and how the behavior of suppliers is related to the price that they can charge for the product. Remember that we said that the quantity of bread that was supplied was influenced by the price of bread, the technology of production, the price of inputs, and the producer's expectations about future prices. What we'll do now is look at the relationship between the quantity of bread supplied and the price of bread, holding constant all of these other factors. Once again, we'll be invoking the assumption ceteris paribus to look at how the quantity of bread supplied in the market is influenced by changes in the market price of bread, holding constant expectations, technology, and the price of inputs. This will give us a supply schedule, and we'll begin by looking at the supply schedule for an individual firm. Suppose we have a baker whose behavior can be summarized in this table. That is, the quantity of bread that our baker supplies is related to the price of bread. When I draw this supply schedule, I am invoking ceteris paribus. I'm holding constant everything else that this baker cares about: technology, input prices, expectations about the future. I'm looking only at how his behavior would change in response to a change in the market price of bread. So, for instance, our particular baker here will supply one loaf of bread per week. That is, he is willing and able to offer one loaf of bread for sale each week when the price of bread is 40 cents per loaf. If the price of bread goes up to 60 cents per loaf, he is willing and able to offer 2 loaves of bread for sale a week, and so forth. At a price of $1, the quantity supplied is 3 loaves of bread. At a price of $1.50, the quantity supplied is 4 loaves, and so forth, all the way to the end of our chart. Again, this supply schedule represents a relationship between the market price of bread and the quantity of bread that our seller is willing and able to offer, holding constant all of the other factors that influence the supplier's behavior. The next step in this analysis is to take the information from this supply schedule and convert it into a supply curve. That is, a graph that represents the relationship between price and quantity supplied for our particular baker. So that's where we'll go next. I'll move this information over onto the board, and I'll put up axes here that I can use to graph the relationship between price and quantity for this baker. So on the horizontal axis, we will be measuring the quantity of bread that is supplied, that is, how much bread our seller is willing and able to offer for sale. And on the vertical axis, we will represent the price of bread, which again will be measured in dollars. Now, I'm going to take the information from the table and represent it in the graph. So at a price of 40 cents per loaf, we get a quantity of bread supplied of 1 loaf per week. So here's a blue dot that represents that combination, 40 cents from the vertical axis and 1 loaf of bread from the horizontal axis. We get 2 loaves of bread when the price goes up to 60 cents per week. So let me go on into my diagram. 2 loaves of bread at a price of 60 cents gives me a point like this one. I get 3 loaves when the price is up to $1. And this particular baker will offer 4 loaves for sale if the price of bread rises to $1.50. We get another loaf of bread at a price of $2.10 per week. So let me put that point on the diagram. And we get 6 loaves of bread when the price is all the way up to $2.50 per week. In each case, I'm measuring price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. I get 7 loaves of bread at a price of $3 per week, or $3 per loaf, 7 loaves of bread per week. At a price of $4 per loaf, this particular baker is willing to offer 8 loaves of bread for sale each week. So that gives me this point. And at a price of $5, this baker offers 9 loaves of bread for sale each week. So that gives me this point. Now, Are these the only imaginable quantities of bread? No, you can imagine fractional quantities. The baker could offer 2 loaves for sale over the course of 3 weeks, which would average out to be 2/3 of a loaf a week. Or he could offer 3 loaves for sale every 2 weeks, which would average out to be 1.5 loaves per week. So it's possible that there would be fractional loaves of bread sold. He could even bake a half a loaf if he was so inclined. And it's also possible to imagine prices varying continually from 0 all the way up to $6, $7, $10. So the continuous variation of prices and the continuous divisibility of quantities of bread allows us to connect these dots and make a smooth supply curve representing this baker's behavior. So let me connect the dots. And when I connect the dots, I have created a supply curve. The supply curve is a collection of points representing the quantity of bread that a baker is willing and able to offer for sale in a given period of time as a function of the price of bread per loaf. So it's a relationship between price and quantity supplied for this particular baker. I'm going to label this curve with an S to indicate that it's the supply curve. Now, there is something you need to notice immediately about the supply curve, and that is that the supply curve slopes upwards. This is a representation of what economists call the law of supply. The law of supply is a regularity that we notice in the economy. That is, as the price of a good or service increases, the quantity that is offered for sale generally increases. Now, does this make sense? What's the intuition behind the law of supply? The intuition behind the law of supply is a concept that we've already considered in this series, and that's the concept of increasing opportunity cost. That is, the more bread a particular baker offers for sale, the higher the cost of each additional loaf. The cost of each additional loaf tends to rise. Here's an example that might make that clearer. Think about what the baker puts into this operation. Every time this baker bakes a loaf of bread, that's taking extra time and extra resources. To bake 1 loaf of bread might take time away from watching television, time that's not especially valuable. His opportunity cost for that hour is small. But if he spends more and more time in the kitchen baking bread, eventually he's taking time away from fishing. He's taking time away from spending with his family. He's taking time away from pleasurable leisure activities like reading. He may also be taking time away from other opportunities to make money. And the more bread that he produces, the more he is having to go to hours of time that are more and more valuable to him. Giving up his TV time is no big deal. Giving up his fishing time is a little more serious. Giving up his family time is more serious still. So we have to pay him larger and larger amounts of money to get him to produce larger and larger quantities of bread. Getting him to produce a small quantity of bread doesn't take much of his time, so he's willing to do that for a small amount of money. But getting him to produce a large quantity of bread begins to take away from time that's more valuable. His opportunity cost of producing additional loaves of bread continually rises as we eat into more and more valuable time, as we take him away from more and more pleasurable activities. That's why it takes higher and higher prices to get this baker to make more and more bread. The supply curve is upward sloping because of increasing opportunity costs. We'll see later in this series how the upward sloping supply curve is related to increasing marginal costs associated with diminishing productivity of resources. But for now, a good answer to the question, why does the supply curve slope upwards, is this. The supply curve slopes upwards because the opportunity costs of production rise as the baker makes more and more bread. In the next lesson, we'll look at those factors that shift the supply curve. That is, what if we allow those things to vary that we previously held constant? What if we relax the assumption of ceteris paribus and allow the price of inputs to change or technology to improve? How would that influence the relationship between the price of bread and the quantity that our baker is willing and able to offer for sale?